Hello.
Hello.
Hi, hi Lou.
Hello.
Hey, is
Hi.
that you, Edith?
Hi.
Uh, hey, folks. We're on, Edith, are you using a regular computer, a desktop?
Yes.
Who else is using a desktop? So Adele or Sheila, anyone who is, where is the raise hand signal? How do you get to it?
Not seeing raise hand.
Yeah.
I see chat. Reactions. I'm not seeing raise hand.
You see, you get raised hand from participants. You have to go to participants.
Okay,
Let me check.
Oh, yeah, there it is. Yep.
Participants, if you click,
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah, you see it. Yep,
You raise hand. Yes.
right.
okay.
There it is. Yep.
All right, so remember, if you can always use that if for some reason I don't see you if you're doing this.
Okay.
I will notice that. I'll notice something eventually.
Can you hear me now?
I can. There you are.
Hi. You people are all so much better at this equipment than mine.
Well, no, you're doing fine.
Next to each person's name, there's a microphone, and like mine's going up and down. And then there's a little box like for hearing. And on mine and Judith Greenfield's, it's in red with a line through it. And everybody else's, including yours, Lou, is just in the same black as everything else. I have no idea what that means.
Well, let's see. Do you see how to mute yourself?
Yeah, mute me. I'm not a.
Okay, so if there's a microphone, oh, I see what you're talking about. The I have that as well. Here, what I have in participants, are you looking in the participants column?
Yes.
Right. For instance, Edith, I have your camera symbol, which is to the right, is red with a slash through it. That means your camera's off. Judy Greenfield's camera is off
Why?
because she didn't turn it on. Same thing with you. You haven't turned yours on yet.
How do you turn it on?
Okay, so hover your cursor over the screen and you'll see a menu come out at the bottom, and over toward the left will be something that says start video.
All it says on the left is invite, mute me, raise hand.
When you're hovering your cursor over the screen, over the Zoom call, because all the way to the left should be a mute with a microphone symbol
Now it says rename.
and a
All right.
camera.
It's back with that thing with the red with the line through it.
Well,
Right.
click it.
That's
It should go away.
That's your camera, and it's telling you that your camera isn't activated. So if are you looking at the bottom of your screen?
Yeah.
Okay. And all the way to the left with your cursor over the Zoom call, you don't see mute or stop or
Yeah,
start video?
Or start video, yes.
There you go. Okay, so you click that.
Rich,
and
start video with a mute.
No, leave the mute because you don't want to mute yourself right now. So click start video.
It stays with the red through it. Oh, just run off, yes. Stop.
There you are.
There you
Okay.
go.
So you're good.
There you go.
I see you. I see your kind of bamboo wallpaper, or right?
Correct.
And we're all set. So
Right.
that's how, if you want to mute yourself, you know how to do that.
Yes.
If you need to turn your video off, you do the same thing. You just hover over the screen with your cursor and then go over, and now if you did it, it should, where the camera is, it should say stop video.
Okay.
You see that? Okay, so that's how you do it.
Thank you.
Okay, sure. Is anybody else have any questions about these Zoom details? All right, good. Let us begin.
I have one thing I want
Who's
to
talking?
say, that you're only talking about, Barbara, you're only talking about desktops now, correct? Yeah,
Correct.
it's not,
On an iPad,
right.
the menu comes down when you swipe from the top.
I don't have an iPad, okay.
Who's talking right now?
Okay.
I can't see.
Barbara.
Barbara,
But the
okay.
left- Barbara
Okay. Got it.
Feinberg, yeah.
So are you on a laptop or an iPad?
Yes,
Which is it?
the left laptop.
Okay, I think it's the
Right,
same.
Adele? That's what it is.
I believe it's the
Uh-huh.
same
Okay,
as a desktop. An iPad,
okay.
with an iPad, so do you see that? Put the cursor over the Zoom screen and a menu should come up at the bottom.
Yeah,
She's got an Apple. That might be different.
yeah.
Does anybody else have an Apple laptop?
Yes, I am.
Yes, Suzanne?
Yes.
So when you hover over the screen, does the menu come up at the bottom?
Yes.
And is it still over to the left where the mute button and the start or stop video button is?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Water, please. But you don't.
Are we,
Yeah.
are there any other, questions? Because we might as well know how to use this as well as we can. And again, is everybody clear how to click on the raise your hand button? Right? If you want to ask a question. Again, sometimes when I'm taking questions, if you just start to talk or you raise your hand and start to talk, that's great too. But if you put on the raise hand button, I will see it and I'll call you. And I also, from my end, once I call on you, I'll turn off the raise hand button. You don't have to worry about that. Other questions? Okay, cool. Now, today I want to go the opposite. I mean, this is really opposite to what we saw and heard last week. In some ways, Fall River Legend is the most thoroughly, literally narrative of all the ballets that we have thus far seen. It was the most like non-spoken theater, I think, out of anything we've seen. So today we're going to go to the opposite end of that and to one of the kind of foundational abstract works in ballet. And this is a piece composed by a German expat here in America in the 40s, Paul Hindemith, and choreographed by the fellow who really brings abstraction into ballet, George Balanchine. So let's take a moment and talk about both Hindemith and Balanchine. And this piece that we are going to watch and even do a little bit of pre-listening to, and that is called The Four Temperaments. Now, who has seen this ballet? So maybe 4 or 5 people? Great. It's part of the repertory of the New York City Ballet. Not done every season, right, Adele? But periodically, right? It's brought back, it's kept in the repertory. So before we talk about the ballet itself, we first were introduced in this class to the work of Balanchine with the piece Apollo from 1928 and music by Igor Stravinsky. And though that wasn't a story being told in nearly the literal terms of something like Fall River Legend, it still had a basic narrative of Apollo being taught by the muses. So with this ballet, there is an underlying theme, but you wouldn't say that there's a narrative. And since Balanchine becomes such an important figure, not only in the ballet world, but in particular in the American ballet world, let's talk for a moment about him. And I'm muting everybody now, okay? So, first of all, Balanchine was born in 1904 in St. Petersburg. And he was married 4 times, each one to one of his dancers. The first time to the woman who, at the beginning of last semester, we heard she made that film, Tamara Jiva or Geva, I'm not sure, how do you pronounce her last name, about the Ballet Russe. And what most of us know is Andrea signing on. She's joining, okay. Is that he took the standards of ballet that he learned as a boy in Russia with the Imperial Ballet, and then he eventually fused it with other schools of movement, including things that he learned in his time in the 30s when he was working on Broadway and in Hollywood. And he became known in this fusion for creating a neoclassical style. One thing about Balanchine that perhaps you know, or perhaps you don't, is that not only did he study ballet with the Imperial Ballet, but he also, and also with, in St. Petersburg, the State Academic Theater for Opera and Ballet. Eventually it became the Mariinsky Ballet. But he also, at the conservatory there, studied piano, and he was an advanced pianist. He studied music theory, counterpoint, harmony, and orchestration, and composition. So he was an accomplished musician. And that comes into play, actually, even in the piece, not just in the way that it informs all of his dance, but the piece that we're about to hear, he initially commissioned from Paul Hindemith because he had some extra money from having worked on Broadway and Hollywood, and he thought it would be fun to commission a piece of music so that he could sit around and play it. And so the piece that Hindemith ends up writing is for piano and strings, and it could be performed by a string orchestra with pianos. You know, you have to be careful about too big to keep the balance right, or it can be performed by a string quartet. So that's part of the motivation for this piece that he commissions from Paul Hindemith that will become the ballet, The Four Temperaments. In 1924, he visited Germany with the Soviet state dancers, and there was a large Russian community. And from there, they bolted. They fled to Paris. And Diaghilev invites him to join the Ballet Russe. And between 1924 and 29, which is when Diaghilev died, Balanchine created 9 ballets for the Ballet Russe. He worked with composers such as Prokofiev on The Prodigal Son, Igor Stravinsky, we know Apollo, Eric Satie, Maurice Ravel, worked with artists who designed sets and costumes such as Picasso and Henri Matisse and so on. We talked about when we saw Apollo that Apollo in some ways came to represent the first quote unquote neoclassical ballet. And it was perfectly in sync with what Stravinsky was interested in musically, which was reimagining the past through the lens of the present. And Apollo, we know, was, if we recall the piece, was also known for the fact that it brought the male dancer to the forefront, which was not typical. He had 2 solos within that ballet. And also, if you recall, there was minimal set. And the kind of minimalism Balanchine thought would keep people from being distracted by unnecessary things and allow them to focus primarily just on the movement. And so Balanchine, again, it's this link between music and movement where he considers music to be the primary influence on choreography more than narrative. He suffered a knee injury in these years in Paris, and that effectively stopped him from dancing. And then after the Ballet Russe breaks up in 1929, Balanchine is something of a nomad. He needs to earn some dough. He stages dances for variety shows and reviews in London, for instance. He spends some time at the Royal Danish Ballet as a guest ballet master. There he creates La Sonnambula, which I believe will stay in the repertory when he brings it over to the New York City Ballet, as well as Danse Concertante on music by Igor Stravinsky. In 1931, he is part of a group that forms the Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo, right? They'd been located in Monte Carlo for much of Diaghilev's time since the Rite of Spring, but now with financial backing, it becomes the Ballet Russe of Monte Carlo. They hire Messine and Balanchine to be the composers, but after a year, it seems like they weren't very happy with Balanchine, and so essentially he's fired. And then he goes on with a librettist who was also hired by the Ballet Russe to form something called Les Ballets. And Les Ballets, even for somebody like me who, knows some about ballet, but is not an avid fan, as some of you are, I know about Les Ballets because even though they lasted only a year, they commissioned works from modern composers. And for instance, a piece that some years ago we listened to in here musically, which was Kurt Weill and Bertolt Brecht's The Seven Deadly Sins, was made for this company. When he comes to the United States, he comes with the assistance of Lincoln Kirstein, who we know, we've talked about him as such a vital person in the world of developing American ballet. And they start the School of American Ballet, which will eventually become the center of teaching for the New York City Ballet. But in the 30s and 40s, he's also spending time in Hollywood. He choreographs 5 films, the first one being Goldwyn Follies, which is one of the worst movies you'll ever see. But it, unfortunately, George Gershwin died while writing that score. And though he finished 4 or 5 songs for it, there was a plan for he and Balanchine to make a ballet together for this movie. And sadly, that could not come to pass. He also worked on Broadway, and he brought ballet before DeMille, before Robbins. He brought ballet into a Broadway show as an integral part of the plot, with a show called On Your Toes by Rodgers and Hart. There were 2 ballets in that, and one of them you probably still know of. I believe that it too is in the repertory, Slaughter on 10th Avenue. And also, interestingly, the credit for choreographers on Broadway was always dances staged by. And Balanchine, for On Your Toes, insisted that it's a choreography by George Balanchine. And once he had it, everybody was going to have it. So he changes the perception of the importance of the role on Broadway. When he comes back and really settles in New York, we've talked about the Ballet Society, again, a precursor to the New York City Ballet that he forms with Kirstein. And it's around this time that he commissions the score from Paul Hindemith. He initially commissions it in 1940, but only gets around to making the ballet to where it had its first performance in November of 1946. And The Four Temperaments, by many, is thought to be the kind of foundation of abstraction in ballet with Balanchine. It's very spare. I mean, what we talked about in terms of minimalist costume, almost no set. But I found this, I had seen it years ago, and I found it really interesting to watch, because there's a unique, compared to everything we've been seeing, kind of angularity to his choreography, which it seems that it's with this piece, from what I'm reading, that really becomes the foundation of his essential style. So with that in mind, first, are there any questions? And then let's talk about this particular work. Any questions? Okay. So the four temperaments, as I said, he commissioned it. Ultimately, I mean, initially thinking, well, it's a good thing to do with this extra money I have, right? You think, where was Hindemith at this moment in his life? And we've talked about this, where Hindemith was the only German composer to leave Nazi Germany. We talked about this a few semesters ago when we were looking at music of the 1930s. So that was probably 4 or 5 semesters ago. And he wasn't Jewish. Initially, his work was banned around 1934 in response to an opera, Matthias der Maler, which was a clear political allegory about the conflict between the artist and repressive political environment. By 36 or so, Hindemith had thought he'd reached some accommodation with the Nazis. Accommodation in that he thought they were going to leave him alone. There'd been a certain amount of outcry when his works were banned from the concert hall and his works were banned from the radio. Part of their gripe with him was that he didn't stop playing with Jewish musicians. He was even suspended from his teaching position. But at a certain point, from his perspective, oh, it's probably the way I felt over the last 4 years, which may not turn out to be right. But I think from his perspective, he felt that this too shall pass, and that this is his home. So he didn't, it's interesting, he didn't do anything to reinforce Nazism. As a matter of fact, in the classroom, he was rather outspoken against it. One of the reasons why he was suspended. But by 1936, the German Nazi cultural minister decides we'll bring him back into the fold. They give him a commission to write a symphony glorifying the Luftwaffe. He accepts the commission and he leaves the country. He just leaves. He just thinks, and he writes a letter to his publisher that's quite famous, basically saying that, you know, there are a few things that are really important in life to me. There's music. I'm just paraphrasing, but you know, there's music, there's my family, and then there's my reputation and my conscience. And now I've been able to take care of all of them. So he goes to Switzerland, but he can't really make a living, and he comes to the United States, and he arrives in 1940. So my sense also, though I haven't literally seen this, is that that's when Balanchine commissions him. The commission, whatever it was, would have helped an immigrant who's just trying to find his footing, who's had to leave so much of what was his back in Germany. So 1940 is also when Hindemith, for instance, and Aaron Copland are the first composition teachers at the first season of Tanglewood. And he gets invited as a guest professor at a couple of places and lecturer, and one of them being Yale. And Yale will then offer him a position where he'll remain till about 1955. And Hindemith, in that way, has a direct impact on American music in how that he trained a certain group of young composers. He also, during this time, I first heard of Hindemith because of a couple of books on music that he'd written, that also on ways to improve your sense of rhythm and ear training, not to mention harmony and composition. So Hindemith devoted himself simultaneously to composition and pedagogy while he was here. The Four Temperaments music seemed to begin based on an idea that Hindemith had had with Massine. They had done a piece, Nobilissima Visione. And it was an enjoyable collaboration. It was a successful work. And they conceived together of a ballet based on the paintings of Bruegel the Elder. And evidently, Hindemith had already begun composing the score, liked what he was doing, and then Massine decides to change the scenario, and he loses confidence in the idea based on this changed scenario. So he breaks off that partnership. When Balanchine commissions him, it seems that he then picks up, starts with that idea, and goes from there. At the time, as I said, Balanchine was making some Broadway and Hollywood dough, much more than a choreographer for ballet was going to make. And he commissioned this music thinking that, well, publicly thinking, well, it's something I'll enjoy playing. Again, I think there's no doubt that it was also something to help a fellow emigre. The piece, which becomes the Four Temperaments, had its first hearing in Balanchine's apartment around 52nd Street and Fifth Avenue. And Balanchine just listened. He didn't play it, but the strings consisted of a few folks that you may have heard of, such as Samuel Dushkin, Nathan Milstein. So it was a kind of all-star chamber music concert where he first heard the work. Balanchine first considers using it for a ballet, 1941, but just circumstances didn't work out. And then eventually, when the Ballet Society was formed by Balanchine and Lincoln Kirstein, and as we said earlier, it was 1946, that's when he decides to make the ballet. The only, evidently the only issue with the first performances were, and as told, for instance, by who would become his fourth wife, Tanakia Leclerc, the dancer. It was her first professional role. And she said the costumes, as designed, were just impractical, and she went a little less diplomatically and said they were hideous, that they gave you a feeling of claustrophobia, which I can't describe. She noted the costumes included a wig with a large white horn in the middle like a unicorn. It also included wings with fingers enclosed. So it was actually when they revived the ballet in 1951 that the costumes were replaced with just black leotards for women, white t-shirts and black tights for men, which also becomes a style for Balanchine. Now, this is called the Four Temperaments. So what's it about? Well, according to Hippocrates, there were four humors. He believed that existence was based by the four basic elements: earth, air, fire, and water. And in humans, there were four elements related to the four basic humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. And in turn, the four humors were related to a particular organ: the brain, lung, spleen, and gallbladder. And the balance of a person's humors was related to their type of personality, making a person either more sanguine, which, looking up in my dictionary, is literally defined as optimistic or positive, especially in an apparently bad or difficult situation, highly talkative, social, outgoing, and charismatic. So that's sanguine. Phlegmatic, defined as having an unemotional, stolidly calm disposition, relaxed, quiet, easygoing. Melancholic, the feeling or expressing of pensive sadness or even depression. And the fourth humor, choleric, which is just bad-tempered and irritable. So according to Hippocrates, being ill meant having an imbalance of these four humors, and treating an illness therefore meant removing an amount of the excessive humor by various means, including bloodletting. So, based on the idea of the four humors, or as they call them, temperaments: sanguine, phlegmatic, melancholic, or choleric, they are going to create this work. As in a book about Balanchine, I quote, that it is an expression and dance of the ancient notion that the human organism is made up of four different humors or temperaments. Each one of us possesses these four humors, but in different degrees, and it is from the dominance of one of them that the four physical and psychological types, melancholic, sanguinic, phlegmatic, and choleric, were derived. Although the score is based on this idea of the four temperaments, neither the music nor the ballet itself makes any specific or literal reference or interpretation of the ideas. So it seems that the four humors or the four temperaments were a starting point for the composer and the choreographer, but not anything to be taken literally. A biographer of Balanchine notes that it's an abstract, plotless ballet, unlike anything that had ever been seen in ballet before, and that the choreography is driven by the music. The music itself, let's spend a little time listening to moments of the score and seeing what it's about. What we're going to listen to first, and primarily in our pre-listening, is the theme itself. Because what Hindemith ends up doing is creating a theme and variations. Now, his sense of what the theme is, though, is very expansive. The expression of the theme takes 5.5 minutes. It's not like a classical theme and variations where you hear a song form, an AABA structure, and that's the theme. The statement of the theme itself is in 3 sections. There's a melody that, if you're familiar with Hindemith's Mathis der Maler or another piece, we've listened to different works of his over the years, so I'm not sure what each of you individually is acquainted with. I believe when we listen to music from the 40s, we also listen to the Symphonic Metamorphosis. The first section is, knowing his music, a very Hindemithian kind of theme. And what makes it so is it has a broad melodic line. And it seems actually rather straightforward and simple. But what's surprising about Hindemith's lyrical writing is that melodically and harmonically, it will go places you don't expect. So on the surface, with rhythm that recurs and makes it feel like a tune that we should be able to recognize or sing back, in fact, it will go through changes that surprise us and take it out of the realm of simple diatonic music. Now, let me call up first. We're going to hear a BBC recording that, for those of you who, didn't I say this? Yes, I'm pretty sure I did. Hold on one second. Huh. I seem to not save this, so hold on one second. I'll just get it very quickly. Okay. So this, I'm going to save it now. This is a recording by the BBC Orchestra, I believe. Is that correct? The BBC Philharmonic. Now, so the theme itself actually has 3 sections. This opening, more lyrical section, then a fast middle section that introduces a kind of virtuosic piano part, introducing the pianist as soloist, and then a closing section that unites the piano and the strings in a kind of rhythm known as a Siciliano. This is the theme in 3 sections, and the rest of the score will be variations on the theme. So let's listen to this theme. For those of you who read music, we're going, I'll have the score up here. You can follow it if you'd like. In case you've never looked at a score, the strings, you notice, are divided into their 5 groups. And you notice they're under the piano, and that's how it's always laid out. If there were percussion instruments, they'd be above the piano. Brass, trumpet, trombone, and tuba would go above that. French horns above the brass. And then the woodwinds would always be the high top lines. Let's listen to the theme See, that's really a beautiful lyrical melody. Listen to harmonically where it goes as it starts to continue. Then these pulsing chords. That's a little motif. And we continue. So that's the feel of that opening idea. You follow it less for thinking, oh, this is a tune I'm going to be able to sing back, than you do for the clear, kind of melodic grace of it and the journey it's going to take you on melodically and harmonically. And so the middle section at an allegro. Hang on, I've got to get you guys back into this. Here's the middle section of the theme. If one looks at the contour, you see a similarity to the opening gestures, but you're not going to hear it so much. Second idea. The third we'll hear when he brings the piano and the strings together. So let's go and listen to the first 5.5 minutes of the piece, which are these three opening ideas that will make up the theme material. Here we go. Always a lot of counterpoint will emerge in Hindemith. He's very German classical in that way. Crowd. Like a concerto now. strings pick it up. And part 3, this Siciliano. Like dance. Decorating it. Theme in the string. Beginning of the Siciliano again. Okay. Now, just so you see what we're going to now encounter are 4 variations. The first is melancholic. And we hear a very more a more dissonant version of what we just heard. So with that, for instance, he's really building on the Siciliano, which was primarily a minor key theme until it resolves in an almost Baroque-like way on a major chord. The second section, or the second variation, excuse me, Sanguine, starts with a waltz and closes with a statement of the Siciliano, but here's the beginning of Sanguine. Again, the more you start to hear that theme, the more you recognize its fragment. and so on. I think that we know when we listen to a dance score, our experience is totally different than when we watch the dance. And when we watch the dance tends to take, I think, more of our conscious brain. So, with no doubt, that will be the case here too. But this is the material and the idea from which Hindemith and Balanchine were working. So we're going to watch a performance now. And Balanchine will set off even the three distinct sections of the theme with different groups of dancers, starting with a pas de deux and moving into, with each new section comes a new combination of dancers. And so just, I hope this little bit of introduction to the music makes you a little more attentive to it as we listen to the whole work. I'm just moving some things around windows so I can get the next one open for us. Let me go to the ballet. What's going to happen? I was able to find a good version of it, but it's in 3 parts. And the first part offers the theme, which we know is really 3 different sections. And then that's the end of that video. And then the second video combines melancholic and sanguine. And then the third, phlegmatic and choleric. Okay? So essentially, we'll see it in 3 videos. The first giving us the theme, and the next, each of the next 2 giving us 2 of the humors or temperaments. And in the order, melancholic, sanguine, phlegmatic, and choleric. Here we go. You know, I think I'm going to go sit in that chair right behind me and enjoy this. Here we go. You're on. What are your thoughts? Joan, you're muted.
I just kept saying, thank you, Louis, for introducing us to the music first, because it just brought so much more to the dance for me than
Good.
when I've seen it, in person even. It was just exquisite. So thank you.
I'm glad. And
No, that's why we're here, but still.
no, I'm glad that also because once you hear that theme a few times, the key ideas,
Mm.
you start to hear it reappearing consciously or unconsciously, but it all starts to cohere more,
Mhm.
I think. So I'm glad. That's great. Other thoughts or questions? What are your reactions? Adele?
Well, I found a picture of one of the original costumes, and this is Maria Tolchi. I don't know if you can see it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Look at that sleeve.
Right. You're not, one thing that I'm, what Balanchine is, I guess, so known for is the way he uses the body and the lines he creates and such. And costumes like that would just obliterate
Sure.
half of that. Yeah. That's something that I found really enjoyable about that ballet. What is the way their bodies are moving, or just not the ways we usually see bodies moving even in ballet. And I probably, unlike some of you, I probably lean a little more toward perhaps some sort of narrative in ballet is a preference, but right, Edith's shaking her head, no way. I know Barbara feels the same way, but I really enjoy that for it seems almost like just the beauty of what the body can do
Yeah.
seems to be
So
what
Louis, I have a
this is about.
question.
Uh-huh.
Were there other compositions of Hindemith that were choreographed?
I believe there were, yeah. I'd have to look to remember, but I remember in reading about it that there were. I know that Balanchine did at least one piece called Kammermusik, and that's based on a Hindemith composition. I don't know if it's Hindemith wrote a series of pieces called Kammermusik, chamber music, basically. Here.
Let me just see. I'm not sure that's Hindemith. Just 1 second.
And I would think that that's Hindemith. Hang on 1 second. Let me also look. Let me look at what my notes here. Yeah, the only
Yeah, Kammermusik #2.
right, and I believe that would be Hindemith.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just looked it up.
That's the only one that I know of Balanchine choreographing. Let me see if I've got any notes in this book about if there are. I mean, there's that Messine piece that I mentioned, Noblissima Visione.
Apparently, he also choreographed Sinfonetta for the New York City Ballet in 1950.
Yeah, and And that's, I don't know that music. That's Hindemith.
Yeah, it is his, it says Sinfonetta in E, premiered 1950.
Yeah, hang on one second. I'm gonna look up.
Choreography by Jacques D'Amboise.
Oh,
And he did some in early on even in Germany, it says here.
yeah. So,
In the 20s even.
but by the way, I'm using this very exclusive inside information source called Wikipedia here.
Yeah, right.
So there was a work called Der Dämon, or I don't know how that would be pronounced in German, 1922. Triadicis Ballet, 1923. Noblissima Visione with Messine, 1938. Four Temperaments, and Herodiade. How do you
I'm
pronounce
also
that?
seeing Metamorphosis, choreographed by Balanchine, 1952.
Right. You see, so I'm looking under his list of works. So now it's a question. Now we're asking what works by him were chosen to be choreographed, and I'm not sure.
I'm working from a book of repertoire of the New York City Ballet.
Oh, okay. That might be more useful for what. Let's see, list of works. Turn. Yeah, I would have to search more just to see which of his pieces have been choreographed. Other questions or thoughts? June.
Lou, I was just curious as to how long it took him to choreograph that.
I'm not sure because he made a kind of false start and then returned to it. So I don't know. And the whole process of choreography is a mystery to me. You know, people will tell me that, oh, how do you write music? That's just such a mysterious thing. It's like, well, I don't know, that makes perfect sense to me, but how do you get people in the room and start to
Are you gonna print again?
create this dance? So I don't know the answer to how long it took. Eleanor?
I have actually a sort of related question. I was wondering if you could say a little bit more about the interaction between Balanchine and Hindemith in terms of.
You know, I haven't read much about it. The book I have of Hindemith, about Hindemith, is a kind of triplicate biography of Hindemith, Bartók, and Stravinsky. So it's not a full biography. I've never read a full biography of Hindemith, and I don't know much. And when I looked up the piece itself, it says very little. My sense is that they most likely agreed to the essential idea, and then Hindemith gave him the music, and Balanchine obviously took his time, which suggests it was not the kind of intense collaborative thing. It seems like Hindemith delivered the score, Balanchine liked the score, did not know what to do with it at first, and eventually kept returning to it. That I know that's general and vague, but that's the best I can do. Edith? Edith, you have to unmute yourself now. There you go.
To me, it was such a treat seeing this beautiful abstract dancing. The music was wonderful and it was enjoyable to listen to. But when I go to the ballet, I'm interested in the dancing mainly. That's why I go to the ballet. And this to me was just so beautiful watching the dancers and what they could do with their bodies, which is so unbelievable. You don't have to worry about the costumes and the background. It was just these wonderful dancers showing what they could do. And to me, that was such a treat. Of all the things we've seen, maybe Apollo, but of all the things we've seen, the story so important and the costumes and the placement. This was just pure dance, and it was fabulous.
Also, do you remember we talked last week about the impact of the way the dance was filmed? And I thought today, I was actually struck by how beautifully I thought the dance was filmed and how it caught some of the shapes terrifically without imposing itself or in a way that seemed to give me an impression wholly different than something I might have received if I was in the audience itself.
Also,
Yes. Go ahead.
the same costumes. And sometimes you didn't know how many were. I was amazed at the end at how many people
Right.
had in it, because with the same costumes and similar bodies and similar type dancing, I had no idea there were so many different people till they
Yeah.
put them.
Where did they all come from? Andrea?
I loved the piece. I've never heard this piece before. And I felt, as the person who was talking before talked about the dancing and the sculptural aspects of the figures and the shapes.
Yeah.
It enabled them to express the sanguine, the choleric, all the different moods of the four temperaments so beautifully that and the fact that it was so simplistic in terms of costume added to it so much. So it was wonderful.
Also, it strikes me as a work that you can view through many lenses. I mean, you can view it through the lenses of the four temperaments, but you can also, I think, watch that dance purely through the lens of watching movement. I don't think it's so linked in a particular way. It depends, I think, on what you want to, how you want to connect with the dance is what struck me. There were times when I was watching it in context of that, and times when I had no sense of, not that I didn't get a sense from them, it's just that I didn't care that they were dancing sanguine or phlegmatic here,
I agree.
Yeah, again, it's an abstract word, and is what's thought to be, I guess, perhaps Balanchine's first really abstract work of importance. It becomes a very important work in the history of ballet. All right, I'm glad you enjoyed this, and I will see you next week. Oh, listen, do me a favor. For those of you who also take the second section, remind me, and even in the next 10 minutes, give some thought to what we want to do in the spring. I mean, in the fall. Okay? Because I think we've done a great period of time on jazz, and it's time to move on. So we'll talk about that, but if you have any thoughts, let me know. No promises, of course, that I will take your suggestion, but I do appreciate them. And at the moment, I'm not bent one way or the other. I will see you soon. Bye-bye.
Okay.